Good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome here this evening for this important presentation from Martin Schockenhoff. We Are Church International is this year celebrating 30 years since we were founded in Rome. So it's a very fitting time to have this presentation about where our church is going at this stage. Our reform goals remain the same. My summary is very simple. Equality for women, equality for laity, equality for LGBTQ plus people, and equality for married folk. Pope Francis' synodal process raised great hopes and became a roller coaster of ups and downs. I hope Pope Leo will endorse it fully and make synodality real. Tonight, we will hear about Synodality in Germany, who, in my opinion, are the world leaders in synodality. The format will be that Martin Schockenhoff will do a detailed presentation, and then there will be every chance for people to ask questions of Martin. You can either use the raise your hand symbol, which you'll find in the front of you. I think we all know that now at this stage. In the reactions, you can find the raise your hand option there. Or if you prefer, put your question into the chat and we'll try to get to it as many as possible. Now, to start off with, I hand you over to Kathy for an opening prayer. Kathy.
Thank you, Colm. Francis of Assisi remains for many of us a global symbol of peace, environmental stewardship, and compassion. This prayer today will really be a creative blend of the traditional prayer of St. Francis that we all know, as well as the reverse St. Francis prayer. And today, we will begin and end with excerpts from that.
We were taught to pray for peace, for calm, for things to settle down. And honestly, when nothing is settled, right was silence would be easier. Love keeps reminding us that peace isn't the same thing as quiet, and harmony isn't faithful if it only works for the people already comfortable. So today we pray a little differently. Where there is hatred, don't let us rush past it with nice words or nervous smiles. Help us stay. Help us tell the truth. Help us refuse to look away.
Let love disturb us. Where there is injury, teach us how to tend wounds gently, and also how to ask why those wounds keep happening over and over again. Let love disturb us. Where there is despair, give us hope that doesn't flinch. Hope that doesn't disappear when things get awkward or costly. Hope that stays. And where there is darkness, give us light. Not the kind that makes everything feel better, but the kind that shows us what we'd rather not see. Let love disturb us. Where we've grown numb, shake us awake. Where tradition matters more to us than actual human lives, and we benefit from that even quietly. Don't let us pretend we don't notice. To this we say, Amen.
I would like to introduce our speaker from today to you, Martin Schockenhoff. Martin was born in Stuttgart in Germany in 1955. He is a solicitor, is married, has 3 children, and additionally he studied theology via distance learning a few years ago. In his parish, he is a leader of worship and second chair of the parish council. As a member of the church, he feels increasingly strongly that the church must be reformed from within if it does not want to wither away. He has been a member of Pro Concilio since 2017 and is an important member of Via Church. It's quite exciting to see what you come up with when you are asked to introduce a friend. Until now, I knew very little about his professional activities. He is an experienced corporate lawyer. Since his student days, he has been heavily involved in specific development aid projects and fair trade. He regularly advises on capital market law and assists companies with transactions and joint ventures. His clients include not only large companies and corporations, but also well-known medium-sized and owner-managed family businesses. And very interesting, he developed the certification and licensing systems for Fair Trade International on a pro bono basis and had the Fair Trade label protected with the European Patent Office. He is a member of the German Association of Corporate Law and the German Association for Industrial Property and Copyright. He speaks German, English, and French. We are very happy to count him among our friends and colleagues. We hold him in high regard for his always constructive and well-considered contributions. He has grown dear to our hearts with his friendly and amiable manner. He confirms one of my lifelong observations. The wisest people are very often the most modest ones. Dear Martin, we are now very excited to hear your thoughts and your information about the synodal path in Germany.
Yeah, Martha, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the praise and for the very benevolent introduction. I hope I can live up to all what you said about me. Last weekend, from January 29 to January 31, the final meeting of the Synodal Path took place. The Synodal Conference, which we deal with today, is the transformation and continuation of the Synodal Path into the form of a permanent body. Before we talk about the German Synodal Conference today, we should clarify what we understand with the words synod or synodality in general, what the meaning is of synodality, because this is all but clear. The word synod, synodality, comes from the Greek, and it means walking together, coming together, or common path. In the early church, there were already synods. The first known was the Council of the Apostles around the year 50 of our time. Apostles and members of the congregation had equal rights, and the Acts say about this Council of the Apostles, then the apostles and the elders, together with the whole congregation, decided. Together with the whole congregation, not only the apostles. And they decided. They did not only listen to the congregation, the apostles decided together with the whole congregation. The participants also included women. Whether they had voting rights, we cannot verify today with certainty. But there are many affirmative passages in the New Testament. From the 2nd century onwards, the clerical class emerged. And by the end of the 4th century, at the latest, only bishops were allowed to participate and vote in synods. This continued until the Reformation. The Protestant churches, which were introduced by the Reformation, are synodal churches in the original sense, which means that bishops and laity deliberate and decide together. On the left hand here, you see the Synod of the Protestant Church in Germany. In the Catholic Church, it remained the case that only bishops were allowed to participate in synods, as you see on the right side. Only recently, synods have been reintroduced in the Catholic Church, in which lay people, men and women, are allowed to participate along with bishops. Opinions differ on what rights lay people have at these synods and what significance the decisions and resolutions of these synods have. This is we will deal with in the following. Now, the German Synodal Conference, the whole synodal process in Germany was not born out of nowhere. It represents the continuation of a long journey that began shortly after Vatican II. Shortly after Vatican II, the Vatican Council had taken many fundamental decisions, but the implementation remained open. This was, by the way, similar to the situation after the end of the Synod in Rome in October 2025. So, this is why, after Vatican II, the so-called Würzburg Synod was convened in Germany. Its purpose was to clarify how the decisions of Vatican II were to be implemented in the diocese and in the parishes. 320 people participated, out of them 212 lay people with voting rights. Laity thus had a 2/3 majority over the bishops. However, the resolutions of the Würzburg Synod were not binding on the bishops. Whether the bishops implemented the resolutions of the Würzburg Synod in their dioceses was solely up to their decision, in line and according to with canon law. In the photo here, you see Josef Ratzinger, the later Pope Benedict XVI, and the famous theologian Karl Rahner. Very soon, Josef Ratzinger left the Würzburg Synod because he did not like lay participation, and in his view, the resolutions went too far. At the Würzburg Synod, resolutions were passed that were implemented in some, but not in all dioceses. These were resolutions about the participation of lay people in parishes and dioceses, about modern religious education in schools, public schools as well as private schools. You may know that in Germany we have religious education as a subject matter in schools, and promotion of ecumenism. Other decisions were not implemented. This concerned topics that required the approval of the Pope. So the Würzburg Synod endorsed the women's diaconate and asked for a review of the mandatory celibacy. Rome was applied for approval, but has not responded to this day. In addition, it was decided to permit the lay sermon. Pope John Paul II later restricted this possibility. Nevertheless, lay preaching has been practiced in several dioceses in Germany for many years and with increasing tendency. The Würzburg Synod thus came next to nothing for the most part, and the spirit of optimism triggered by Vatican II was partially lost. The dilution of the aggiornamento spirit has continued under the popes John Paul II and Benedict XVI. But with Pope Francis, new hope emerged. He convened the synod, in which lay people with voting rights were allowed to participate. Unfortunately, he has taken important issues, important topics off the agenda of the synod. Nevertheless, the final document states that healthful decentralization should be strived for. Many questions that so far have been dealt with in Rome could be dealt with by the bishops in their dioceses in future. This, at least, is how it was understood by reform-minded bishops in Germany and the Central Committee of German Catholics, the so-called ZDK. What was happening now at this time in Germany around 2015, 16, 17, 18? After the abuse scandal had already shaken the Catholic Church for several years, the so-called MHG report was published in September 2018. This report is a systematic scholarly study by an independent institute on a broad empirical basis, and the report concluded that the sexual abuse is not only caused by individual failure of individuals, but also that it has systemic causes in the Church, in particular power structures, mandatory celibacy, and integrated sexual teaching. The German bishops were desperate, and they asked the laity for help. In March 2019, they invited the Central Committee to the Synodal Path, which was to deal with the topics listed above, so structures of power, mandatory celibacy, and integrated sexual teaching. The Central Committee agreed, provided that the question of the ordination of women was added to the agenda. The bishops agreed, some of them reluctantly. Of course, there was opposition in the Vatican. The cardinals were not used to such questions being discussed by bishops together with lay people, and even joint decisions to be made on such issues. In June 2019, the Pope wrote an ambivalent letter in which he warned that the German reform process endangered the unity of the Church. Nevertheless, the synodal path started. It started on 1st December 2019, 4 months before Pope Francis first announced the synod. So the synodal path in Germany was the forerunner of the synod. In Germany, there has been overwhelming agreement with the synodal path. 96% of the German Catholics advocated and hoped for reforms. Only a few conservative bishops and groups spoke against it. The opposition of the Vatican didn't subside, and the attitude of Pope Francis remained ambivalent. He sent critical messages through his cardinals, but on the other hand, he encouraged the synodal movement worldwide. What was the outcome of the synodal path? What were its results? Over the 4 years of its existence, several resolutions were adopted. A concrete decision was made on the participation of lay people in the election of bishops, as well as on the blessing of homosexual and remarried couples. The ordination of women was advocated, as was the preaching by lay people. Now, you may notice nothing new, the same topics as 50 years earlier in the Würzburg Synod. All resolutions of the synodal path are not binding on the bishops, as I've already explained. This is a prerequisite of canon law. Each bishop can therefore decide for himself whether he wants to implement those decisions in his diocese. Some bishops did it, others didn't. Nevertheless, the headwind from Rome and conservatives did not ebb away. This was the synodal path. The synodal path is over. What comes next? Already in September 2022, the decision was made to transfer the synodal path into a permanent body, the Synodal Council, as it was named then. Not Synodal Conference, Synodal Council. Its task was to debate and decide on substantial issues of church life in Germany. Again, there was fierce criticism from Rome, and the Pope wrote that the plans for the Synodal Council were not compatible with the sacramental structure of the Church. The sacramental structure of the Church. This argument, which has been repeated many times, parroted many times by conservative cardinals and other opponents of reform, is a typical cryptic argument, which means a pretext that obscures true motives. The prevailing structure of the Church is not a sacrament. As we all know, according to Catholic tradition, Jesus has instituted 7 sacraments. The hierarchical structure is not one of them. The critics cannot think of any valid counter-arguments against the Synod. The plans for the Synodal Council did not violate canon law, as its decisions were not to be binding on the bishops. So they created the celestial and uplifting but meaningless term of a sacramental structure. The real reason for the fierce opposition is that the cardinals fear for their power, and so they readily gave in to the resistance from fundamentalist and ultra-conservative circles. But this criticism did not have absolutely no effect. Because of the ongoing criticism from Rome, which did not die down even under the new Pope Leo XIV, the German bishops in 2025 coordinated the project of the Synodal Council with Rome. And after tough negotiations, Rome signaled its approval. Was it an unconditional approval? No, as you may have guessed. Rome demanded the following changes. This was in November 2025. The name shall be changed from Synodal Council to Synodal Conference. So the word council had to be avoided. And the task decision-making on substantial issues of the church life in Germany has to be replaced by adopting resolutions on substantial issues of church life in Germany. So no decision-making, only adopting resolutions. These were rather cosmetic corrections without impact on the substance. But however, it unveiled the mindset of the cardinals. Rome is not prepared to relinquish even an inch of its power to laity. How does the permanent body, the Synodal Conference, look like? So you see here, the total number of delegates, of members, is 81. The first group of 27 consists of the bishops or delegates of the bishops. So it may be the bishops of the 25 dioceses in Germany. The second group, also 27, is selected by the Central Committee, which means by the laity. And the third group of 27 will be jointly selected by the Bishops' Conference and the Central Committee. Of this third group of 27, at least 2 shall be members of the Advisory Board of Victims of Sexual Violence, and 2 shall be members of the Conference of Superiors of Religious Orders. At least 13 out of these 27 members shall be women, and at least 5 shall be under 30 years old. At least 3 members shall belong to communities with a different mother tongue. So the aim behind this very sophisticated qualification profile is minorities and marginalized group to be represented in the Synodal Conference. At the request of 1/3 of each group or of the female and non-binary members present, the final vote on every topic has to be postponed and the respective matter has to be discussed further. This is laid down in the draft articles of the Synodal Conference. And if this happens, the matter shall be revised and resubmitted to the Synodal Conference in the revised version. However, the request to postpone the final vote may only be made once. 9 bishops can request a postponement of the final vote, 1/3 of the group of bishops, but they cannot veto the final vote of the revised version. As final decisions only need a 2/3 majority, the 27 bishops theoretically could be outvoted by the other 2 groups, the Central Committee and the 27 of the third group. However, the intention of the postponement option is to facilitate consensual decisions, not antagonistic, but consensual decisions. We will talk about this later on a little bit more. So the approval to the Synodal Conference has already been made by the Central Committee. Outstanding, but to be expected, is the approval from the Bishops' Conference. This will be held in February, in 2 weeks' time, and from the Vatican. It is also expected because the articles have been coordinated with the Vatican. And it will remain the same that resolutions of the Synodal Conference will not be binding on the bishops. So each bishop will be responsible for implementing or not these resolutions in his respective diocese, and he alone can decide on that. What are the tasks and competencies of the Synodal Conference in detail? This is listed, it is also listed in the draft articles of the statutes. First, the Synodal Conference comments on developments in society and church in Germany as a part of the worldwide church. It debates and adopts resolutions on important issues of church life in Germany. It promotes the church in the service of evangelization. It adopts resolutions on strategic questions of budgeting and other financial issues on the Catholic Church in Germany. It reports regularly on its work, very good. It uses and tests forms of participation of church members. And now we have 2 very important additional competencies. It deals with topics that are assigned to it by the Bishops' Conference or the ZDK, the committee, and it can on its own take up and decide on issues within the scope of its competence. So this means it is not limited to the topics here listed above, but it can adopt additional topics, not limited, but they only have to be assigned by the Bishops' Conference or the Central Committee. This, in my eyes, is very, very important. It is a difference to the Synod in Rome. And also very important is it can decide on its own to take up further issues within its scope of the competence. I'm very hopeful, and I expect from bishops as well as from the Central Committee that they make use of this possibility. What can we expect and hope for? Before we look ahead, a look back can help. Has there been any progress compared to Vatican II and the Würzburg Synod? Has the synodal path brought progress? If we look at concrete results, the answer is sobering. Questions taken up by the Würzburg Synod, such as women's diaconate and voluntary celibacy, have not made any progress. The prospects for this appear even worse than they did 50 years ago. If you don't just look at results, things look a little better. Synodal awareness has increased. In Germany today, it would be difficult to imagine that the bishops would deliberate and decide on the most important reform issues alone, without laity. For the first time, the Synodal Conference will create a permanent synodal body in which lay people have equal rights, including voting rights. This is a progress, and it is also positive that at the Synodal Conference lay people are not only heard, but that they can vote. As you know, this is viewed critically by many bishops in the Universal Church and also by the Vatican. They distinguish between decision-making and decision-taking, also a very cryptic differentiation. Decision-making means, in their view, listening to the laity and exchanging ideas with them. This, in the Cardinal's view, is permissible. Decision-taking means to make the decision afterwards, and this should, in their view, remain exclusively the domain of the bishops. A positive example, however, for the transformative force of the synodal path is Bishop Overbeck von Essen. Some of you will know him as we have met him in Rome last year, 2024. I have been told that Bishop Overbeck proceeds as follows in his diocese. He discusses the issues in the diocesan council and puts them to a vote. He then decides alone in accordance with canon law. However, he always adopts the result of the diocesan council's vote, even if he had voted against it. That deserves great respect, as it is proof of his personal attitude. A sustainable solution for the Church, however, would require to change canon law. This can realistically not be expected in the foreseeable future. So the Synodal Conference establishes an opportunity for synodality, but the success depends on the ongoing goodwill of the bishops and, of course, of the other delegates. Can the Synodal Conference be a template for other countries? From the point of view of canon law, the answer is yes, because canon law is the same everywhere in the Universal Church. However, a synodal body at the national level would require that there is an adequate and representative counterpart on the side of the lay people. In Germany, this is the Central Committee. In most other countries, there is no body of comparable public awareness and weight that can speak for all Catholics. The Synodal Conference also builds on a long tradition of cooperation between bishops and lay organizations that goes back to the 19th century. For more than 150 years, there have been Catholic associations with many members that collaborate with the bishops, for example, Caritas, Kolping, and so on. Diocesan synods have also been taking place with lay participation for a long time. It is true that according to general canon law, diocesan synods are not allowed to pass resolutions that bind the bishop. In Germany, however, there is a distinctive feature, the church tax system. Based on various concordats, the German dioceses are allowed to levy church tax, which is collected by the state on behalf of the dioceses. And the revenue from church tax makes up the largest part of the budgets of the dioceses. In my diocese, this is the Diocese of Rottenburg-Stuttgart, there is a special procedure to adopt the budget, the so-called Rottenburg model. It was implemented 50 years ago, shortly after the end of Vatican II. Our bishop at that time was liberal and farsighted. He recognized that after the end of Vatican II, there was a window of opportunity to implement reforms, and he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity before the window closed again. Very wise, as we sadly know today. According to the Rottenburg model, the diocesan council, which consists of lay people, decides, the majority is lay people, decides on the budget of the diocese. If the bishop does not like the budget, he can veto it, but he cannot decide on a different budget. If he vetoes it, the budget does not take effect. This can lead to a shutdown, as is often the case in the United States. The bishop and the council then must continue to deliberate until they agree on a budget. But that leads us away from our question, which is, can the Synodal Conference serve as a model for other countries? The answer is yes, in principle, the model of a Synodal Conference can be transferred to other countries, but this depends largely on the willingness of the respective bishops' conference and the bishops in their respective dioceses and the specific situation of the church in these countries. Let us look at some examples from the recent past for comparison. The first example was the Amazon Synod in the year 2019. The Amazon Synod was initiated by the Pope. It was not based on an agreement between the local bishops and lay organizations. Lay people had no right to vote. The decision of the Amazon Synod to ordain viri probati as priests was rejected by the Pope. The Amazon Synod can therefore not be compared with the Synodal Conference in Germany. Second instance, Plenary Council of Australia, which took place between 2018 and 2022. The Plenary Council was convoked by the Australian bishops with the prior approval of the Pope. Lay people were allowed to participate, but had no real voting rights. The voting process was two-stage. The first stage was a preliminary vote, a consultative vote, in which all delegates, including the laity, were allowed to participate. This preliminary vote served to explore the opinion. Then the decisive vote, the deliberative vote, was carried out, in which only bishops were allowed to participate. These deliberative votes of the plenary councils are canonically binding on the bishops, as they were adopted by the bishops only. In this respect, the plenary council goes beyond the Synodal Conference. The result, of course, is the same. Binding decisions are always made by the bishops alone. And third example, the synodal pathway in Ireland starting in 2025. According to the information I got from Colm, there is a good mix of male and female lay delegates, but all are elected by the bishops. While the initial listening sessions were very open, including 96% in favor of ordaining women, the bishops have taken hold on the agenda, which likely will focus on belonging and family. Key issues, for example, women and the role of laity in decision-taking, will most likely not be tackled. So these have been 3 examples. The question is now, what about Austria, Switzerland, France, UK? I cannot tell you because many of you come from these countries and you know much better than I know. And so I would leave this for our discussion, for your questions and for your comments. And if eventually nothing happens, if the bishops don't do anything, then we should just do it ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. A very, very comprehensive presentation and a very clear presentation of what's happening in Germany and what can and cannot be done. I certainly was initially skeptical of the concessions being made along the way for the reform process. But I think what has come up at the end is a compromise. You've had to yield to try and get the approval of the bishops, to try and get the approval of Rome. And it has been a difficult journey to arrive at where you are now with the German Synodal Conference, which still needs to be approved by the German bishops and by Rome as well, which we hopefully will see this year. So what I want to do now is ask anybody who has any questions, if you would use the reaction button down below and raise your hand so you come to the top of the screen. Also, if you want to, rather than raising your hand, there's the other option to write it into the chat, and we'll be monitoring that as well. So any questions can come from either way. Margaret Mary Moore, first up with your question. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to ask Martin and also you, Colm, about how the lay delegates are selected and what is the criteria. I know that in American dioceses, who gets selected and who gives the biggest donation. But in terms of the synodal process, could you give some insight? What are the qualifications for being selected to be in a synodal participant?
Yes, the delegates from the Central Committee? Do you mean the delegates from the Central Committee?
Yes, I mean, yes, when you're doing it in the Central Committee and also when the bishops do it. What is the criteria for being?
So the bishops, my guess is that it is the group of bishops comprises 27 members. And we have 27 dioceses in Germany. So you can guess who it will be. It will be the bishops. And this was the same in the synodal path. And I do not think that they will change it. However, there are 4 bishops which have opted out before the start of the synodal conference. This is the Bishop of Cologne, Mr. Wölki, and 3 Bavarian conservative bishops. 2 of them now have announced that they will participate. So the remaining 2, which have opted out, they will be possibly replaced by 2 other bishops. I do not know. This is up to the bishops. The delegates of the Central Committee, or to be selected by the Central Committee, they do not have to be members of the synodal of the Central Committee. In the synodal path, the delegates selected by the committee were high-ranking individuals, for example, some politicians, some professors of theology, leaders of lay organizations such as the Catholic Youth Organization, some well-known individuals. And the third group, with this special requirements, with this special profile, This third group has to be selected jointly by the Bishops' Conference and the Central Committee. So they have to agree on it. You have seen there are somewhat complicated and overlapping criteria. It will not be so easy to put together a short list or a list of 27 candidates who will meet these criteria and this proportional membership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's a clever structure that they have come up with the 27, 27, 27. It's very clever, and I think
it is sophisticated. It's on the one hand, it looks as if lay people could outvote the bishops, but in fact, the procedure is designed for compromises.
There's a question here from Valerie in the chat. I have followed the synodal path since its inception. What you have described sounds more like a council than a synod, where there is discernment through careful listening to each other. This is known as conversation in the spirit, with reflection on scripture, prayer, silence, and then each person in the group speaking from the heart and boldly. How does this happen with the German model?
Yeah, it is true. This was a point of criticism. It was criticized that the discussions on the synodal path were too secular and too antagonistic, like in a parliament, the spiritual dimension being neglected. And this is one point they want to change. Bishop Betzing has explained last weekend that they will follow a structural model which integrates the elements of the Synod in Rome, the elements of the so-called spiritual conversation. This is the method which was practiced on the Synod in Rome. And the spiritual conversation, it focuses on mutual listening and spiritual exchange. According to this model, the consultations are preceded by a period of personal prayer and preparation. And in the first round of the sessions, the participants share in small groups what is important for them. In the second round, the participants exchange what they have heard. The others listen only. Discussions or direct reactions are not intended. And this is followed by periods of silence during which participants are encouraged to reflect on what has been triggered within them. Only in a later stage of the discussion, common themes can be identified and discussed. The aim is to gradually recognize where there are agreement and tensions and where are new insights. So in my eyes, this is positive as it promotes a mutual understanding, and it avoids, or at least it is designed to avoid, rhetorical battles. However, it must be secured that unfounded, cryptic positions can be discussed. The purpose of the spiritual conversation is to improve the exchange, not to avoid exchange. It is not to give the bishops or the conservatives an easy means to get away without exchanging their position with the others. We will see how it will work in the Synodal Conference. On the Synod in Rome, this method brought about rather modest results. But the attitude of the participants and the mood during the Synod was good, according to all what I've heard. The results, yes.
Thanks, Martin. Jeffrey Mulhern, if you'd like to come in, you've got your hand raised there. Jeffrey.
Yes, I haven't got my face up at the moment, but my question is, was it the intention of the Synod on Synodality that bishops and priests should accept the consensus of the synod process, even though they take the decision that are made by the synod process. So, was it the intention? That bishops and priests should actually accept unless they have really strong reasons against?
I think it was the attitude of the 27 bishops were not the same. Some of the bishops really were ready to accept majority decisions, even if they were against them. Some other bishops fiercely challenged this view, and they said it is already a compromise that we sit together with lay people and listen to them, but it is up to us to decide. From the view of canon law, it is clear that it is the bishops alone who decide. But as I have explained, the example of Bishop Overbeck shows that many bishops are prepared to come to a real synodality, to a real exchange, and that they are prepared to share power with the laity. Whether this will happen, we can see in the respective dioceses of the bishops. Some will do, some already do it, but many will not do. Some of them will remain passive, not because they are really against synodality, but for fear. Because for the bishops, it is the easiest way to do nothing. Then they cannot be criticized by Rome, by the Vatican. They cannot be criticized by conservative circles in Germany. And the rest, the 96% who want reforms, they are not happy with that, but most of them either remain loyal or they leave the church.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're lucky with the bishops as well in Germany, not just with the lay association there. Martin, there's a question here from Elsa on the chat. What do young German Catholics think of the Synodal Conference? Is it an opportunity for them to be protagonists in the church, or are young people already outside the church elsewhere?
Yeah, most of the young people have never heard about the Synodal Conference or the Synodal Path. This is only a point of interest, a topic of interest for a small minority. However, this minority exists. And many of the young people who are still spiritually interested and still interested and actively practicing the teachings of Jesus, many of them have emigrated from the church, because for them the institutionalized church is no more acceptable. They see that nothing will change, and so they just do it themselves. They form themselves smaller groups, and they have spiritual circles where they can live their faith in smaller groups and where they are not harassed by the bishops or by conservative priests. There are some other young people who are still loyal and who not have lost all hope, who are still active within the institution. But this is a small minority.
Mm-hmm. Sadly, a common picture in many places. Peter, come to you with your question. Peter Johnson, please.
Thanks, Cole. It seems pretty clear that the church needs a major cultural change amongst the hierarchy in order for synodality to be adopted. The current model is in fact autocracy, and that's the way bishops have been formed, and it would seem that most don't want to give it up. Autocracy is the antithesis of synodality. The feedback that seems to be coming through is that throughout the world, many bishops will conduct their synods and might even have their diocesan pastoral councils, but many will do it merely as a form. They will control those diocesan pastoral councils by their appointments, and they will control those synods by both appointments and by control of the agenda. And having completed what the churches, the Vatican's asked of them, they'll go back to their autocratic ways. In fact, they'll never have left them. How can we get, I mean, assuming Pope Leo is genuine about this, how do we get him to introduce new formation for all bishops to reject autocracy? That seems to me not to have been open in the church, that this is a rejection of the current model of decision-making and leadership in the church.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, yes. There are many bishops which are, I would tell it, cynical. They say, okay, let's participate, let's listen to the laity, let's exchange their views with ours, but we will never adopt all the decisions and all the points on their wish list. But there are others too. And last year I met a priest who said, reforms, actual reforms, we will only have if all the clerical personnel will be exchanged. If all the bishops had to step down and if we had new bishops with another attitude and another mood. So this was his personal view. There is something true in it, because the bishops, they have been socialized in our church. And they have been socialized in a church in which the teaching that only unmarried men can become priest and hold power, they have internalized it. Even if they are liberal and if they are benevolent, many of them, they cannot change. And this is what I have met with many bishops who have a goodwill and who are popular. But if it really comes to change the hierarchical system, then very often they are not prepared to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true, very true. There's the question here from Irene O'Byrne-Maguire, wondering about the selection of bishops process. Does it happen? What form does this take? Would this take?
Yes, there is the canon law, as you know, and according to canon law, the bishops are appointed by the Pope, or the Pope approves of bishops who have been otherwise selected or elected or appointed. In Germany, there is a special procedure for the election of bishops, and this goes back to the so-called concordats. Concordats are international treaties between states. And you know, the Vatican is a state, or the Holy See is an entity, and the Vatican has entered into concordats with German countries. And according to this, in line with these concordats, the German bishops have to be elected. And the synodal path, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, he adopted a decision how lay people could be included in the process of electing bishops in line with canon law and in line with these concordats. And you must know that even if canon law would prohibit the participation of lay people in the election of bishops, if the concordats would allow it, then the concordats would prevail, because the law of international treaties is higher than canon law, and the church is bound to international treaties it has entered into with other states. So this is the legal basis. Sorry for explaining it, but it is important. So in Germany, there was adopted a resolution of the synodal path that lay people have to be have to participate in the first stage. They can make proposals. So on the long list, they can put names on a long list. Then the long list has to be sent to Rome, and Rome will send back a short list of 3 bishops, 3 candidates. And then, according to this decision of the synodal path, this short list has to be disclosed to the delegates, the lay delegates, and they can give a recommendation to the chapter which of the 3 candidates to be elected. This was relatively far-reaching, and it was fully in line with canon law because it was the bishops alone, not the bishop, the chapter alone, who eventually could elect the bishop, could appoint the bishop. But nevertheless, the Vatican was against it. And they said, oh, it is against the papal secrecy. So you cannot trust lay people, and so it is not allowed, it is not permissible. And if the chapters would stick to this decision, to this resolution of the synodal path, then they would risk the Pope to unilaterally appoint a bishop of his choice. And this was enough for all the chapters in Germany in last year, and there were four bishops were to be appointed in Germany last year, to abandon and to ignore this this resolution of the synodal path, and the bishops were appointed in the old way without the participation of lay people.
Yeah, 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Right.
There's a comment from Edgar Bittner. He's a married priest and was official consultant of the German Synod to abolish compulsory celibacy. Was that something that was recommended as well?
Oh, what I look? No, I didn't understand, but I have to look. It's in the chat?
Yeah, he just, yeah.
So 1 moment.
Hello, Martin.
Yeah, hello.
73 of the bishops agreed to abolish the priest's plight to be married, and 39% of the people of the synod also are against the obligation for priests to do not marry, and there is a new a climate change, in the bishop conference and in the responsibles for the church in Germany.
Yeah, I think this is true. There are some bishops who have publicly confessed or publicly said that they personally are in favor of married people also could become priests, men and women. One example of this is Mr. Betzing, the chairman of the German Bishops' Conference. He said in an interview that he personally was in favor of ordaining all people, equality for all. However, in his job as a chairman of the German Bishops' Conference, he has to be more moderate. And I know that there are others who still are in favor of the compulsory celibacy. In my view, the German bishops should be more audacious. Of course, they cannot change canon law, but they could more actively ask the Vatican and the Pope to make a change. And they have possibilities in Germany to allow further lay participation in the liturgy or in other tasks, for example, baptism, marriage, or the Eucharist. So why do they not allow far-reaching forms of liturgy which can be done by people not ordained? This is one, I think this would be possible, and there even would be ways possible under canon law. But bishops are too meek. They are not audacious enough.
They are cowards.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah. Thanks for that, Edgar. Thank you. Another question from Irene O'Byrne McGuire. Has there been any pushback from those dioceses of the 4 bishops who have opted out of the Synodal Conference process?
Yes. First, they said they will not participate in the financing of the Synodal Conference. And this was very tricky because the financing comes from the organization, from the Bishops' Conference, and decisions on the financing of such separate projects requires a unanimous decision of the bishops. And so if 4 of only 1 would vote against, they could not finance it from the common budget of the German Bishops' Conference. They have to find separate ways. But according all what I have heard, the financing is now secured, even without these bishops. Then we have still, as I explained, 2 bishops who will not participate. 2 others will participate now after the Synodal Conference has been coordinated with Rome. But there are still 2 which have not given in. And all they can do is to speak against it, not to participate, and to publicly criticize the Synodal Conference.
Yes, Martin, there's a long piece in the chat. I won't ask you to read it all. I'll summarize it, but it's from Susanna Thiel, and she's with Roman Catholic women priests and their bishops who will be meeting on the 17th of February. The Vatican, the Curia. Oh, we're getting an echo there. Oh, suddenly started coming an echo. But the question, it just seems like the Curia and the bishops, they refuse any and every conversation with women who claim to have discerned a calling to priesthood themselves. Whether it's as a deacon or as a priest or as a bishop, they won't engage in any conversations at all. Did the question of women priests and the ordination of women, was that something that's come up in I think it was one of the ones you mentioned at the Synodal path in Germany?
Yes, of course. It was one of the 4 topics, and it was added to the agenda because the Central Committee of Catholics in Germany made it a requirement, a precondition to participate in the Synodal path. The bishops agreed. It was not their idea. They agreed because they were under pressure. And it was a big choice. It was there was a separate commission, and there also were adopted resolutions clearly in favor of the ordination of women, at least as diacons. And this now, bishops do not have the power to ordain women without approval from the Pope. And as you said, in Rome, they are not ready to even discuss it, to even speak to women. And our new Pope also has made clear in an interview which he had with his American journalist, that for the time being, the ordination of women is not on his agenda. And he published this commission report, the so-called commission report, that for the time being, women could not be ordained for theological reasons, as Jesus, the old argument, as Jesus only had chosen men and not women. This also is a cryptic argument in the sense I have explained before. So to summarize, it is very, very sad, but you cannot force people to meet other people if they don't want. It is very, very sad, and it is against the teachings of Jesus, but it's the bishops and the cardinals who have the power.
Yes, yeah. I found it particularly reprehensible, maybe that's the wrong word, but I can't understand that the German delegation from the German synodal path is made up obviously of lay people and of bishops. And when they went for meetings in Rome, and there have been a lot of meetings in Rome over the last couple of years, as you said, to try to come to some sort of a consensus, Rome has resolutely refused to have any meetings with any lay people, men or women. They will only talk to other bishops. So it's only the bishops who have to go along there. And when we're talking about synodality and having the lay people involved, I find that incredible that they still dig their heels in like that and say they will only talk to other bishops. We only talk to them. It's unfathomable. It's certainly most unchristian. Most unchristian.
Right.
Margaret Mary Moore, you want to come in with another point. Margaret
Yes,
Mary.
I wanted to offer a proposal after following Martin's excellent presentation, and that is I'm going to be giving a paper on the seminary system to our national North American theologians in June. And the point I'm making is that the seminary system has to change. And I'm proposing that anyone who wants to, feels called by God for ministry, instead of going to a seminary, it would be a co-ed facility for theology and ministry, where men, women would all eat, work, live, and pray together under very high standards of oversight. And through the prayer and discernment and relationships, we could pick to be married, to be single, to be a priest, to be a brother, to be a sister. But it would be the Holy Spirit giving us that vocation, which we would accept with joy. And I think God made us as men and women to be together, to make friendships with each other. Marriage is a profound, amazing sacrament. And as we have it right now, all the money and the resources of our church go into single men and their formation. So it's a moral theology issue also that we have many seminaries in the United States, and they're repeating each other. And they're like the little fiefdom of the bishop, and it's totally unhealthy because we ask about the sexual abuse. How did that happen? Where did it come from? Well, Cardinal McCarrick was an abuser. It comes from our bishops. It comes from our priests. And where did our priests come from? They've all come from seminaries. So in a sense, we could look at some of the seminary system as incubators of pathology, because it's terribly unhealthy to isolate a group of single men and expect them to rise through the ranks and be bishops and cardinals to direct the church. It's just unhealthy. Secondly, it's immoral with all the money. And look at the payback in all of your countries for the cover-ups and for sexual abuse. In fact, there have been several murders of priests killing women in the United States. It's not a secret. It's even on major television on those programs where they have Dateline or recent crimes. So everybody is talking about it, and it's a very deep scandal. And it's happened in other places, other countries. So I think money needs to be reappropriated to educate leaders in every country, co-educationally, and we have to reevaluate that system. And I think for all of you, I'm just offering this as a proposal to get it in the pipeline, because I think it's healthier. What we're producing now is not healthy people, not healthy priests, not healthy bishops. And even at the very top, we've had some terrible misbehavior and criminal behavior. So please talk about this in the years.
Yeah.
You agree with that, Martin, that the more work needs to be done in the seminaries. There's a comment from Cornelia Rausch. The small group of young German people that took part in the synodal path raised their voices very loud against discrimination and for a more democratic church.
It's no question. Only comments.
Hey. Thanks, Cornelia. Thank you.
Yeah, it is true. And also the reform groups, they have been very visible on the final session of the Synodal Path last weekend in Stuttgart. We were, I would say, some 80 people or so. Some of the participants today also participated there. And then Mr. Betzing came out. The vice president of the Bishops' Conference came out. Mrs. Stetter-Karp, the president, the chairman of the Central Committee, came out. Professor Söding, a very highly reputed professor, came out. All they spoke to us, and also other prominent members of the Synodal Path. They came to us. They spoke also with the young people, who were very loud and who explicitly asked for change. So we are visible. The young people also are visible, but they don't have the power. And if the bishops do not want to speak to them and do not hear them, and even if they do not come out, even if they remain in the room, in the house, so that you cannot see them, then many of them, they say, we are not a democracy. That's very true in a different sense. In a democracy, leaders as these, they had to step down. They would not be elected again. Yeah, but this the church is not a democracy, and so we lay people legally, we have no possibility to change that. Legally speaking, we have other means.
Martha Heitzer has a question in the chat. What can we do to change the canon law? As long as it is not changed, all our efforts will come to nothing.
This is right. If we have some change, this is due to liberal bishops and to their personal goodwill. But if he has a successor who is less liberal, more conservative, then it will be over. So it is true. For a sustainable change, we need a change in the canon law, because the canon law is the basis, is the constitution of the church, the legal constitution. The spiritual constitution is the Bible, the teachings of Jesus. And as we all know, the legal constitution is not in line with our spiritual constitution, because Jesus never would have accepted a law as we today have in the canon law.
Yeah. Peter Johnson has a final comment there. The Vatican's refusal to deal with lay people, including women priests, is in essence a rejection of synodality. It's hypocritical. This is too common an autocratic attitude amongst bishops, even ignoring correspondence. We see that a lot, unfortunately. Right, I think we're coming towards the end of our time here now. Sorry, I hadn't seen Hugo. Hugo, you've got your hand up there, please.
To do with seminaries. I have a friend who's a priest. He's a couple of years older than me, 86. He said he went to a junior seminary, and there they were always told, you mustn't think for yourself. You must listen to what your superiors say, and then put that out to the people. And this went on all through his training until he was ordained, when, of course, he rebelled and refused to, and said, no, on the contrary, what we must do is form communities that involve thinking people. But essentially, perhaps a lot of the problem in the church is just that bishops, all through the process, the clergy aren't, they're not used to women. They're not even used to having their own ideas. They're they're full of meting out dictates of higher up. Anyway, that was the question.
Yeah, and it's not only in the seminaries and the priests who act like that. It's also bishops. Bishop Oster in Germany from Bavaria, one of the 4 dissenting bishops, he was asked whether he would be ready for the blessing of homosexuals. And then he said no. Then he was asked, so why? Why do you don't do it? He said, because the Pope didn't allow it. Then he was asked, so, and in case the Pope would allow it, would you do it then? And then he said, yes. Obedience.
The pyramid again. Yeah. The autocratic systems. Very good. I'm going to draw a line there. I'm going to ask Elsa to say a few words of thanks we've had lots of people to thank for this evening. Elsa, over to you.
I feel profound gratitude for what Martin told us this evening, and also for this very broad participation with so many contributions. Thank you for giving me hope. Paulo Freire, a great Brazilian educator, noted that the verb esperar, which comes from the root esperanza, that is hope, sorry Edson for my bad pronunciation, does not mean to hope, but to wait. So he invented a new verb, esperanzar, which means to hope actively, not waiting for change to come from outside, but rather becoming agents of change ourselves. To hope is to rise up. To hope is to pursue. To hope is to build. To hope is not to give up. To hope is to move forward. To hope is to join with others to do things differently. This is what happened to the disciples of Emmaus, Mary and Cleopas, who once were their unknown companion on the journey with despair. We were hoping. But then there is that burning in their hearts and the breaking of the word and of the bread, which makes them run back to Jerusalem. A poem by liberation theologian Pedro Casaldaliga, Teimosia, that is stubbornness, says, knowing how to wait, knowing at the same time how to force the hour of this urgency that does not allow waiting. Dorothee Sölle, a Protestant theologian who spoke of creative disobedience and of the divine as empowering, giving believers confidence in their divine potential and abilities, wrote, there is a very appropriate saying in German, wer sich nicht wehrt, lebt versichert. That is, he or she who does not fight lives badly. From a religious point of view, he or she who does not fight lives badly before God. He or she who does not fight does not believe, love, or hope. In my opinion, a group of Christians who call themselves the Church are only the Church if they fight, living in resistance. That is what it means to hope against hope. Primo Levi, an Italian partisan and Holocaust survivor, wrote a book titled, If Not Now, When? It was a quote from the Talmud. In 2010, Italian feminists took to the streets to protest the scandal involving the Prime Minister's humiliation of women, and they created the If Not Now, When movement. I believe these words resonate tonight as well for the Universal Catholic Church, which needs to change. To do so requires the commitment of all of us, who through baptism became kings, priests and prophets, and have become responsible for the destiny of our church. The way we speak of the gospel is already the gospel. The way the church experiences power relations, gender justice, and the way it makes decisions are already a testimony or counter-testimony to the gospel. From the German synodal journey, we can learn courage and stubbornness, the hope in a different church closer to the teachings of Jesus, which did not distinguish between clergy and laity, between women and men. If not now.
Elsa, thank you. Kathy, over to you for the final prayer.
And we will close as we opened with the balance of a prayer for the kind of peace that doesn't behave by Mark Sandlin. Love keeps whispering and sometimes shouting that gentleness isn't weakness, that kindness isn't passivity, and that silence is not peace. Because peace without justice isn't peace. It is just harm with better manners. Let love disturb us, disturb our comfort, disturb the excuses we make so we can sleep at night, disturb the ways we call convenience faith, mess with our calendars, mess with our money, mess with the tables where we decide who gets a seat and who doesn't.
Let love disturb us. Help us want more than being understood. Help us want understanding. Help us want more than being liked. Help us want to love in ways that actually cost us something. Not just talking about justice, but practicing it with our bodies, with our choices, with our lives. Move us closer to those pushed to the edges. Teach us how to love without fixing, without saving, without standing at a safe distance. Make us channels, not just of peace, but of disruption. Let love disturb us until love refuses to settle for the world as it is. To this we say, Amen.
Thank you all very much for taking part. Thank you particularly to Martin for putting together that excellent presentation, and to all our team, from Elsa to Martha to Gemma to Kathy, all who participated, and particularly all of you who joined in tonight with your questions. And I hope that you got something out of this meeting. Thank you all. Thank you.